Up until now, what I've been using to vacuum up sawdust in the garage is this household vacuum cleaner. You can see that this compartment is a third of the way full with sawdust just from one afternoon of cutting boards. And this is a really good household vacuum cleaner, I'll say that. The filter is hand washable. You can just spray it out and let it dry and put it back in, use it over and over. It works really well inside. But for the garage, this tube is kind of small. It's maybe 1 inch in diameter. In fact, I mean, this vacuum cleaner is so good that I bought another one exactly like it for in the house. But here I'm showing that the latch doesn't work. The part that holds it vertically, you're supposed to be able to tap the latch with a foot to release it, but it won't stay anymore by itself. That part is broken, which is why I moved it into the garage. But that gets really frustrating. Every time you move it around, the thing tips over. And also that compartment only holds maybe 1/3 of a gallon, which is pretty small capacity for garage work. So I figured it was time to upgrade to a more industrial size wet dry vac. This is the wet dry vac that I decided to replace my household vacuum cleaner with in the garage. And there were 3 choices of Craftsman wet dry vacs at the big box store. One was smaller than this. I want to say maybe a 3-gallon capacity, and one was larger. It was 13 or 15 gallons, something like that. The smaller one probably seemed like it had enough capacity for what I would need because I'm not running a huge shop. The big one seemed like it was probably too much. It would probably take up too much space in my garage, and I would never, I don't think, ever need that much capacity. The reason that I chose this 8-gallon over the smaller version was because of the hose size. This one says it has a 1 7/8 inch diameter hose, which I think it's actually a little smaller than that, but it's bigger than my household vacuum cleaner hose. Whereas the Craftsman 3-gallon, I think it was a 3-gallon, the smaller size of this at the store, its hose was the same size as the household vacuum cleaner that I've been using, or at least it looked like it. Well, like I said, I think the capacity would have been big enough. The hose size was smaller, and I wanted it to be able to just swoop up more chunks of sawdust. Now, as far as the amperage and peak horsepower, those sorts of things, those statistics all looked like they were the same between the 3 sizes of Craftsman shop vacs. Of course, when I got it home, I was very anxious to unbox the vacuum cleaner, which I began doing with my trusty DeWalt pocket knife. It does come with an owner's manual, which I probably should have read first, but I didn't. I think that'll be okay. Then I pulled out some of the various attachments, like these tubes that make the hose longer or make it easier. Pulling the unit out of the box was fairly easy. It was lighter than I expected it to be. There's a big solid power switch, which I liked, and very easy to see, even in low light. I think these clips here are for attaching or resting attachments in, possibly, or wrapping the hose around the top of the unit. And there are plastic clips, which it took me a second to figure out how to open the unit and pull the motor housing off the top. The air filter there is attached, of course. Looks like a pretty giant solid unit compared to other device air filters I've seen. It's about 3 or 4 times the size of my car's air filter, for example. It comes off fairly easily. That part was really intuitive, how to turn the twisting knob to lock it in place. Then there's looks like a 10-foot length of hose, which was pretty handy and quite a bit longer than the hose I'm used to on my vacuum cleaner. There are several different attachments you can put on the end of the hose. They just squeeze on. And the part that you have to install yourself are the casters, which I figured out quickly how to put those on. There's also the handle, which came with a couple of screws that had to be installed. There is a foam filter, more attachments, some of them wrapped in cardboard. Okay, so I've turned the unit over, I grabbed a screwdriver. Again, it was fairly easy to figure out how these casters wedged into the dovetail-shaped spaces. I got the screws out and started putting them in. That part was simple enough. Let's just speed through it. Once I got the casters in, turned it back over, it was easy enough to figure out how to put the top back on, and then I had to put the handle in. Also, that part was easy. There were 2 obvious screw holes. Let's speed through that. You can pick the whole thing up by the handle, which was not difficult. I liked the fact that the handle hung over the sides just a little bit, which looked like it might hold the hose in place or be able to wrap the cord around. It took me a second to figure out which hole to attach the hose to. There's an exhaust port at the top and an intake port at the bottom. Should have been a little bit more intuitive, but I've never used one of these before. Here I'm trying to figure out how to store the hose. This turned out to be one of the biggest downsides of this unit for me, is how the hose stores when not in use. There's not a really good place to do it compactly. But these attachments store very intelligently in the little hexagonal shapes on top of the casters. One way works more solidly than the other. And those come in really handy to just be stored vertically right there when the device is not in use. There is a Velcro strap that wraps around the cord that's permanently attached to it, which I think will come in handy, so I won't have to keep looking for a twist tie when I want to wrap the cord up. And the cord is fairly long as well, which is also nice. Not quite as long as the household vacuum cleaner's cord, but should be long enough to move this unit around the garage to convenient places. Between the length of the hose and the length of the cord, I think I can reach just about every spot in the garage from a single outlet. Okay, it's time to test this thing actually in the garage. It didn't take me too long to unstrap this cord and plug it in. And then I immediately began to vacuum. One thing I liked about this is that it wasn't actually as loud as the household vacuum cleaner. I didn't measure, I don't have a decibel meter or anything like that, but just based on the sound that I'm hearing from my ears and through my ear protection, it sounds quieter, or at least a lower pitch than the household vacuum cleaner that I was using. You can hear the sound here. And there's no reason to watch this entire process, but I will speed it up, and it took about 4 minutes, 3 to 4 minutes, to vacuum up all this sawdust, clean off the table, and get the entire garage floor clear of sawdust, and so on. All right, I'm all done vacuuming, and I'm just going to open this up and check to see what's inside. Here is where I discovered that I had forgotten that I had stored my attachments inside the canister before I started vacuuming, so they're all covered in sawdust. But I was pretty happy with the way that it operated and how quickly it went. The only downside, besides the ones that I've already mentioned, are the fact that the hose seems to have a lot of static cling, so some dust gets on the outside of it as well as on the body of the canister itself, but that's pretty easily cleaned off with the rag. Overall, I'm really glad I got this, and couldn't be happier.